Well, we've got 25 so far. Hey everyone, if you didn't hear the announcement before, welcome to the Homeless Coalition meeting. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and provide us with contact information so we can add you to the mailing list. And this meeting is being recorded. Katie, do you see your other presenter?
I do not. I can fire off a quick email though, one moment.
Okay. It looks like our admission has slowed down a little bit. So if you want, I can go ahead and open us. Yeah? Okay. So welcome everyone. My name is Marisa Shepik. I'm the Homeless Outreach Team Manager with Whatcom Homeless Service Center under the Opportunity Council umbrella. Welcome to the coalition meeting. We have Katie Sullivan, who will be running the meeting for us while Terry is out of office. And please feel free to put in all of your contact information or any questions you may have in the chat box, and we'll be monitoring that. And the meeting is being recorded. So I'm going to go ahead and start with our land acknowledgement. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we gather today on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascades watershed from the time immemorial. Please join me in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors, the Lummi Nation and Nooksack tribe, for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. So now I will go ahead and turn it over to Katie.
Thank you, Marisa. Appreciate that. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Whatcom County Coalition to End Homelessness meeting. As Marisa noted, my name is Katie Sullivan, and I work with the City of Bellingham in the Department of Planning and Community Development. We have a number of folks out today, so I'll be providing coverage for Terry and facilitating this meeting today. It's nice to see you all, and I look forward to an interesting discussion today. For folks who don't know, Marisa Shopok with the HOT team is going to be helping us out today and monitoring things. Also, Samuel Lutz from the City of Bellingham will be assisting with monitoring and facilitating this meeting today. So thank you, Samuel and Marisa. Really appreciated it. I want to invite everyone on this call to introduce themselves in the chat. I know many of you have already, but feel free to pop in a little note, say hi, say what organization you're with, if you're with an organization. We have a really interesting panel today. to discuss a topic that our steering committee is really excited to focus on, and that is affordable housing. So I'll take this opportunity to introduce this topic in our panel. So a topic that comes up time and time again in discussions around homelessness is affordable housing, and specifically some of the more technical questions of developing affordable housing. So some of these questions include, why does it take so long to develop affordable housing in this community? What are some of the hoops that developers have to jump through to get affordable housing built? What does the financing look like on an affordable housing project development? And is that different than a market rate development? How does an affordable housing project get tax credits, and what even are tax credits? So we've got a great panel today that's going to discuss their experience with the process of developing an affordable housing project, and their experience in the development process. We have folks across a broad spectrum here. We have large developers, we have nonprofit leaders. So I want to take a moment to introduce our panel and who's going to be speaking today before they launch into their presentations. First, I want to ask, is there anyone on this meeting from Lydia Place who plans to present as part of this panel? If not, I can launch into introducing Rosie and Ellen. So we have two panelists today. The first is Ellen Lowe joining us today from Mercy Housing Northwest. Ellen and Mercy Housing Northwest recently led the development of the Barkley Family Project, an affordable housing project that is currently under construction, and when completed will offer about 77 homes of affordable housing specifically to families. We're looking forward to hearing from Ellen on her experience in developing larger scale affordable housing in this community and learning more about this project in particular. The last speaker on today's panel is Rosie Crow from the Opportunity Council. Rosie and her colleague Adrian are leading the development of a new senior-oriented affordable housing development, and we're excited to have to some of the complexities that come along with developing an affordable housing project for a senior population. So thank you to Ellen and Rosie. We're really excited to learn more. And without further ado, Ellen, if you want to go first, the floor is all yours.
Sure, thanks, Katie, and hi, everybody. Nice to be with you all. Thanks for having me. I'm going to start by sharing a little bit about Mercy and then talk a little bit about the affordable housing development process in terms of the projects we work on, and then actually share a little bit about our Millworks family housing project, which we are currently working on down in the waterfront. So let me share my screen. Give me 1 second here. Can folks see this okay?
Says you've started screen sharing, but we just see a black screen.
Shoot, okay. How about now? It's working? Okay.
Yes,
I think it's
great.
Just froze there for a second, thanks. Okay, so yeah, just really quickly for folks who may not be familiar with Mercy Housing, we're a large nonprofit affordable housing developer. We work across Washington State. Bellingham is one of our key communities that we've been in the Bellingham community for over 20 years. And we primarily work on family and senior housing, all affordable. And we're a nonprofit owner, developer, and service provider. So again, these are a couple examples of projects folks may be familiar with. The Eleanor senior project in downtown Bellingham. This is an image of Barkley that Katie mentioned, which is currently under construction and slated to be complete November this year. So we're really excited about that and appreciative of city and state support that helped that project get moving. Really excited about that one. This is an image of one of our transit-oriented development projects in Seattle along the light rail. But again, we work on permanently affordable rental housing, and one of the key focuses for Mercy is providing on-site resident services to the folks living in the building, and then also, making sure that we're, a good part of the community in terms of design and sustainability and another number of other factors. Just really quickly, I'm sure folks on this call are kind of familiar, but there are a lot of different ways that people talk about affordable housing and kind of different populations, different incomes. In terms of the work that Mercy does and permanent rental housing, we're typically talking about housing that's up to 60% of area median income, and that it is focused on this general concept of households paying no more than 30% of their income towards housing. So again, acknowledging that there are a lot of different types of developers doing different types of housing, homeownership, special needs housing, sort of a whole range of things. But today I'll kind of dive into what Mercy focuses on in the projects that we work on. And again, just for a little bit more detail on that, again, when I say households paying no more than 30% of their income, the projects that Mercy income and rent restricted. So this means that folks need to qualify based on income levels to live in the building. And so just to give kind of a sense, these are actually slightly old 2021 rents, but to kind of give you a sense of what that looks like here in Whatcom and Bellingham. A 30% of area median income household, a 3-person household, that means an income around $22,000 a year would pay about $550 for a 2-bedroom apartment. And then sort of towards the higher end of the income spectrum that we serve, a 60% AMI, area median income household, sort of the income around $44,000 and almost $1,100 for a 2-bedroom rent. So that kind of gives you a sense of what we're talking about when we're talking about these units. So in terms of how we approach these projects and kind of what are the big pieces in our development process and how we think about starting a new project, for example, I think the first big thing obviously is sort of need and population. And so that often comes from kind of understanding what the need is in the community and what different partners or community members are voicing as what is needed in the community. And so that drives both the housing population that we endeavor to serve, but can also drive a sort of mixed use component. And so, for example, on both our Barclay project currently under construction and Millworks that I'll talk about shortly, part of the project is to include childcare, given the strong need that we've heard in the community that we've seen in Bellingham in recent years, that trying to find a way to combine that as part of the project has become a priority for us. So, having a sense of the population that we're trying to serve, then it really becomes about assessing feasibility for a project. And so, finding land and figuring out what's going to be possible on the project. And so that takes in, there are a number of different pieces that go into that, environmental surveys, title, working through design to understand what the zoning and the capacity might be on a certain site. And kind of trying to dig into a bunch of different pieces to understand what really is possible. Project cost is another huge driver for us, knowing that resources are limited in our community and across the state, and trying to be as efficient as we can to be able to build as many units as we can on a site, but within feasibility. And so the big cost drivers that we see are land. Land is a huge cost driver, and land costs continue to go up and continue to create challenges for finding good sites for projects. Construction, obviously, as I'm sure folks are aware, that's another one that is always just a challenge as the market continues to be pretty hot, and it continues to escalate, especially in the last several years with COVID and supply chain and all of those things. Construction cost is a really significant driver in our feasibility and how these projects move forward. And the other big driver for sort of feasibility on these projects is the financing and the funding stack. And so that involves, both local funding, public funding, City of Bellingham, Whatcom County, as well as state funding and policy. So understanding kind of what the priorities are at the different, in the different funding pools, and how a project might or might not fit into those competitive environments. And I'll talk more about this as we go, but the competitiveness for these projects, the number of projects trying to get funded across the state is constantly increasing. And so we're constantly trying to figure out how can we best position a project to be successful in competing for public funding. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. And as I sort of alluded to, sort of the big chunks of funding for these projects kind of comes from two buckets. One is public funding in the form of local or state and sometimes federal resources. And so that's grant or low interest loan programs. And so, the Bellingham Home Fund is a key example of this and a key part of success for affordable housing in Bellingham. And so the city's partnership and the city's support of projects in Bellingham is really critical to not only supporting the project, but helping the project access other sources of funding at the state level as well. The other sort of key driver for Mercy and the projects that we work on is the low-income housing tax credit program, which Katie mentioned earlier. And this is a program actually run, through the IRS. It is a program in which affordable housing developers are able to access tax credits through the state and sell those credits to an investor who in exchange provides equity to the project. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but those credits are also allocated through a competitive process. And so there's a limit to how many projects in Bellingham, in Whatcom County, and also across the state can be successful in competing for those resources each year. So those are kind of the main buckets of the funding that we try to access to make these projects possible. And I'll talk a little bit kind of about how these pieces of funding come together for a project. And the sort of image here on the left is sort of a simple example of market rate financing. Conventional development for a multifamily market rate project is primarily composed of investor equity and bank debt. And in that case, the rental income that a developer can expect on a project is adequate both to pay debt and also provide some cash flow. And so appreciation and potential sale of the asset allows an owner to make a return on that investment. And so that's kind of the simple model, is this debt and equity model. Affordable housing, because of the low rents that we're providing, it means that it's really challenging to leverage significant amounts of debt. And we're also trying to hold on to these properties in the long term and not resell them. And so what that means is that we need to help fill that gap. With the smaller piece of debt, we are able to access this tax credit equity, but it means that the public funds are needed to help kind of bridge that gap and enable us to completely fund the project. What that means is that we end up with a project that has this affordability component and provides the community with low rents in the long term.
Ellen, it looks like we've got a hand raised. It just went down. Never mind.
Oh yeah, no, if folks, I can pause for a moment. I know I'm kind of racing through this if folks have questions.
I don't see anyone else.
Okay, thanks. So then kind of on, if this slide that I just showed is talking about sort of the capital sources that we access to build these projects, how do we operate them in the long term? And again, just to give folks a sort of comparison to a conventional market rate project, this graphic tries to show. So in a market rate scenario, you have market rate rents, and then you have your operating expenses and debt payments. And the offset between the two means that there's some cash flow left over for the owner to, whether that is return on their investment or, to pay debt. So that's very different from an affordable housing scenario where we have such limited rents, and often our operating expenses may be even slightly driven up by the need to provide services for folks in the building, depending on a specific project. And so it means that cash flow for affordable housing projects is either minimal or sometimes even break even. And so again, just trying to help folks understand kind of some of the differences we see between a conventional market rate project and sort of some of the ways that it works for affordable housing. One more, really trying to do a quick overview of tax credits. I know that's often an area of interest for folks, and I wish I could simply explain this in one slide. The tax credit world is a bit of a complex world, but essentially trying to explain the concept is that investors, whether that's a large bank or a nonprofit syndicator that works in affordable housing, investors are looking to lower their tax burden and are interested in doing that by purchasing credits, and in return, they provide equity into these projects. And so how that works from the developer side is that the Washington State Housing Finance Commission, a state agency, is responsible for allocating how many of these credits are available in each state each year. And so there's a competitive process to secure these credits that developers are then able to turn around and use to access equity with investors. That said, it is a marketplace with private investors, and so that market can fluctuate based on whether it's the corporate tax rate or different policies demand in a certain area. And so tax credit pricing and how much equity you're able to get for a tax credit becomes a key piece of negotiating a successful project. So I just ran through a ton of information about trying to talk a little bit about basics of the financing. I guess, Sammy or Katie, let me know if you see any questions pop up. And I'll just talk a little bit now about Millworks really briefly, just to give folks a sense of one of the projects we're working on right now in Bellingham. So this is the site for Millworks, and I'm sure folks are familiar in the waterfront district, the former Lignin parcel. And so sort of the basic concept behind this project is, again, hearing the need for affordable housing. Obviously, as we all know, in Bellingham, there's a huge need, and in particular, how challenging it can be as a family to find housing. So finding a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom unit. The focus of this project, again, will be family housing. The other piece of this is, as I mentioned before, the increasing need we're seeing for childcare in Bellingham. And so another component of this project is to provide childcare on site. The other thing we're always looking for too is sort of an amenity-rich location, and thinking about how families who live in this building will be connected to services, transit, amenities. And so having access to a site in the downtown waterfront obviously provides tons of opportunities for families who will live here. So this is a project that we're working on in partnership with the Whatcom Community Foundation and the Port of Bellingham, who owns the majority of the land in the waterfront district and has been working on a redevelopment of the district for many years. We're also partnering with the YMCA on the childcare piece, and sort of the basic concept of the project is 83 units of family housing. So again, with a focus, over half, almost 60% of those units will be 2 and 3 bedroom units. It will serve households at 30%, 50%, and 60% of area and median income, including 10% of units that will be set aside for homeless households in partnership with the Opportunity Council. And that's a big priority, both of the city, obviously, and of Mercy, to figure out a way in these projects to include units that can serve homeless households, knowing the great need that exists there. Again, as I mentioned, the Early Learning Center partnership with the YMCA. And so that's kind of the basic concept for this project. The funding sources for this project are sort of similar to what I've been talking about. The city of Bellingham, as well as the State Housing Trust Fund, another key funder for these affordable housing projects. It is a low-income housing tax credit project. It uses the 4% credit, as well as permanent debt and some philanthropic support from the Community Foundation. And I'll talk in a minute a little bit about the environmental on this project, but obviously one of the big cost drivers that we're seeing right now is just construction costs and escalation we're seeing in the construction market, and trying to create an efficient design so that we can manage the construction costs going forward. I'll touch really quickly on the environmental cleanup on this site, because I'm sure folks are aware, and this is just to give a sense too of some of the complexities that we deal with in affordable housing. I think we all wish that we would have access to sites that are, perfectly ideal in every way, but in an urban environment, that's often not the position we find ourselves in. And so this site is part of the larger planned cleanup for the waterfront that is being conducted by the Port of Bellingham in partnership with the Department of Ecology. And they've already done a lot of work in the district and are continuing that. And so this site is actually being fast-tracked for cleanup this year ahead of our construction site starting, so that the contaminated soil that exists on this site can be fully removed before we proceed with affordable housing and childcare development on the site. One of the exciting things about this is that the Department of Commerce has recently launched a new program to provide funding for environmental cleanup of sites for affordable housing in particular. So we're able to access that funding source to help ensure that the site is fully cleaned up. And then Katie, to your point, sort of, how does it take so long? What are the steps that kind of go into these projects? This is a project that we started talking about in 2019, potentially even a little bit earlier than that. But, the amount of work that it takes, both by Mercy, and in partnership with folks, design team, and kind of all these different stakeholders, is really a sort of iterative process of kind of building the concept and plan for one of these projects. So this timeline kind of gives a brief sense of sort of the different activities, from kind of early conversation to feasibility, to sort of starting the design and planning process, and then kind of moving through public funding applications and securing the site, the land acquisition. And in this case also, the environmental cleanup is a key piece of where we're going. So, there's so many different pieces that need to come together for these projects, and that's kind of often what's behind the timelines. So we're kind of, right at this spot here where we're getting ready to start the cleanup construction so that we can move into the housing construction, hopefully by the end of 2022, which would mean that the project will be complete in 2024. So that's kind of where we're trying to go with Millworks. And again, we're super appreciative of the number of partners from the city, Opportunity Council, many folks to help us make this possible. But yeah, we're really excited about it. And I'll stop there and see if folks have questions. I feel like I just went quickly through a lot of information, so happy to chat more if folks have questions. And I can stop sharing.
Thank you, Ellen. I think we have a question in the chat. Joe Gibson wants to know, Ellen, where on the waterfront is the site of the project you mentioned?
Yeah, the project is located at the corner of Cornwall Ave and West Laurel. I can pull back this image. It's just an aerial, so I don't know if I have a great map, but if you're coming down the hill that enters the waterfront on Cornwall Avenue, it's right at that corner. And there's actually, it's kind of just across from the digesters, if you're familiar. So right kind of along where the railroad track passes as well.
Great. Any questions, folks? I have a question, if that's okay. I'm hoping you can speak to if folks are interested in applying to live at any of these affordable housing developments. Do you know the process by which they can apply? Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for example, Barclay Housing, which will be opening in November of this year, we're planning to start taking applications in July or August. And so we'll be sharing more information about that project in the coming months, so that folks can find out more information about how to apply. But essentially there is an income qualification process. And we, Mercy Housing has a property management team that manages our properties, and they'll work with folks individually to kind of go through all the different qualification requirements and steps to do that process. And if folks have specific questions, I can follow up more, but that's the big picture.
Great, thanks, Ellen. It looks like we have a hand up. Fawn EO, the floor is yours to ask Ellen a question.
Hi, how's my audio? Okay, great. I was wondering, just a specific design question. Was wondering how much universal designing for folks with developmental disabilities or sensory sensitivities. Are there going to be like motor rooms? I was just looking at the amenity rich portion of it. I was just wondering if like motor rooms and stuff were included in the design of the millworks and Barclay.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and universal design is definitely one of our priorities. Obviously the projects are ADA compliant, but we also look for opportunities to kind of increase accessibility based on our experience at other properties. And we have many residents who have definitely a priority in both trying to meet the standards, but then also finding ways to increase access and improve universal design throughout both indoor and outdoor spaces.
Also wondering if Mercy Housing will has any interest in like helping folks with their own home ownership dreams and plans and such.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned really briefly at the beginning, but one of the big the most important piece of sort of Mercy and what we do is our resident services programming. And so at our properties, we have an on-site resident services coordinator who works with residents in kind of whatever capacity that those folks need. And one of the service areas that we provide is housing stability and financial stability. So we have, we do work with folks towards home ownership. We do at our Sterling Meadows property, we have had folks who have moved from that rental apartment to being able to purchase their own home. And so financial stability programming is definitely one of our focuses in our services side.
Thank you, Vaughn. Thank you, Ellen. I think we're going to move on to Rosie's presentation. And if folks have any project-specific questions, we can definitely take them at the end of each individual presentation. But if it's okay, I think we're going to hold space at the end for more general questions from our panel. So noting that, the floor is yours, Rosie, if you'd like to present.
Okay, well, first I have to apologize that I wasn't told I was supposed to prepare a presentation. I was a really last minute stand-in for Adrian, so my apologies. I just came prepared to talk about our current project. Thankfully, Ellen, beautiful job. Totally loved it. Helped me understand tax credits even more. So thank you for that. And I'm hopefully can also help during the questions. So I know a lot of people here, and it's, I feel, a little imposter syndrome when I see so many great developers on this call already. But my name is Rosie Crow. I've been working at the Opportunity Council for about 4 years now. I have a lot of background in operations of affordable housing and worked in that realm for a long time. I've recently changed roles and now working on the development side. So I just have some things to share about our current project, which is Laurel Forest. I was trying to find the exact dates when our project kind of started to kind of line up with Ellen's kind of timeline. I think it's possibly one of the faster projects. That's at least what I've been told compared to others. I think we started maybe talking about it in 2021. Currently, we're in the middle of land acquisition, and we're hoping to start prepping the land in mid-July and start construction in October with a 14-month construction, fingers crossed. I'm told not to say that it will exceed 14 months, with hopefully then us getting a certificate of occupancy in December of 2023. Our project, similar to Millworks, is going to feature affordable housing and childcare. A little different, ours is targeted at seniors. So we're going to have 56 units, all 1 bedrooms, targeted for folks who are 55 and older. Vaughn, thanks for bringing up universal design. That's really important process also for our property, is, we're going to be serving people as they age in place. So all of our units, we're going to have ADA units as well as all of the units meeting universal design, meaning like we have extra wide doorways and we can easily swap out cabinetry so that if you end up later in life needing a wheelchair, maybe you don't need a wheelchair or walker now, but later you do, we can move the cabinetry out so that you can roll up to a sink, which is, I've never seen that before. And that's a really exciting design feature in our building, which I'm jazzed about. We don't yet have an application process. We'll be, since we haven't started building it yet, but this will be our first time at the Opportunity Council, where we'll be doing, just taking applications from the community. Previously, our housing developments have all been focused on, they've all been 100% set aside for homeless. So we've taken all our referrals from the Whatcom Homeless Service Center. This building is going to have also a 10% set aside. So 6 units for folks coming from the Whatcom Homeless Service Center and from experiencing homelessness. But this will be our first time where we have units that are just available. So that's going to be an exciting new thing for us as an agency. Half of the units will be for folks who are at 50% of the area median income, and half will be for folks at 30%. We don't yet have a provider yet we're just building childcare. We'll figure out who the provider is later right now. Although the Opportunity Council also provides, has early learning center. So we could always do it ourselves, but we haven't yet firmed that up, but there will be that childcare. And we're hoping to do some really cool programming around like intergenerational, since we have seniors and, little ones, maybe being able to do some really cool programming, which I think is really enriching for both sides of the equation. So that's our, I had a picture that I was like, oh no, I don't have anything cool to show. So I should have put this up at the beginning, but this is a drawing of what it will look like. Of course, I think this has probably changed a little bit since they sent this over, because like Ellen said, it's an iterative design process as we try and figure out how can we fit the most units and all, the best amenities and just cram it all into a small space. But this is what we're looking at right now, with the childcare being the kind of part in the cream color that will be separate, and then the rest being the apartment buildings.
I'm not seeing that, Rosie, if you're intending to share.
Oh, thanks, Samia. Sorry, apparently just not my day. There we go. All right, there we go. And this is going to be called Laurel Forest. I don't know if we have a better name for it. It's at the corner of Laurel and Forest, and I think someone at some point was like, should we get a different name? And I think so far it's just, we've been sticking with Laurel and Forest. So naming buildings is a surprisingly difficult part of the process. So for now, that's what we're called. If that changes, I'll keep you all posted, but that's where we're at right now. And also to speak to what Ellen, I was just counting up, I think right now we have 8 funding sources in our stack. So it's definitely a lot of different people giving us money, and they all have different things they want slightly. And that includes our money for the childcare, which is separated out from our money for the building itself. So it definitely can take a while to build these buildings, because you're pulling together so many different applications and making sure that we're following all the rules for all the different pots of money. So that's why it does take a while. And I know that coming from the world of operations to the world of development, I was surprised. I'm so used to thinking about things quickly that thinking about building a building in 2 or 3 years felt really slow to me. And that's I know that actually building a building in 2 to 3 years now is pretty fast, but I know that's a difficult part of the process for me coming from that world. Oh, sorry, Katie, I hopefully filled in with some information and hopefully I can answer questions.
No, that was great, Rosie. Does anyone have any project-specific questions about the Laurel Forest project? We have a hand up, Vaughn EO.
Howdy, I was wondering, who, you said 8 different funders. Who are those 8 funding sources so far?
Yeah, let me pull up my, let's see, let me stop sharing my screen. There we go. And find, oh, stop share. Okay. We have early learning facilities grant, and that's going towards the childcare portion. We had a direct appropriation from a state senator. We have American Rescue Plan Act funding going towards both the housing and the childcare. And we have Housing Trust Fund, that's through the Washington State Department of Commerce. We have a Connecting Housing to Infrastructure grant through the Department of Commerce. We also received a low income tax credit allocation. So that's through Washington State Housing Finance Commission. And then the city of Bellingham, we have a levy funding through them. So some of it goes to infrastructure, some of it's going to childcare, some of it's going to the housing itself. So it's a real mix and of sources. Thumbs up.
Great, thanks, Vaughn. I have a quick project-specific question, and maybe this veers into general question territory, but I'm wondering if you can speak to any of the funding sources. Was having childcare on site, did that preclude you from pursuing any funding sources, or did that kind of change the landscape of funding that you could apply for with this project?
Yeah, it definitely, I think it's probably one of those things where it's both a good thing and extra challenge in some ways. I mean, Ellen could probably speak to the experience with Millworks. You know, there is funding to do childcare, but then there's also things specifically about housing of like, you know, the money that goes to housing only can go to housing. You can't go to anything to do with the childcare. So you just have to keep really like strict some boundaries between the funds. And there's different wage rates that are triggered for different types of building residential versus building a commercial part of the building. So there's just kind of some things that I'm still learning a lot about in terms of like what the costs are and keeping track. So it's one of those things, it's like for the financing side, it's like probably, I don't know if it's just a wash or, you know, you get access to more money, but then also you got to keep track of a lot more things. So, but at the end of the day, we definitely need more childcare in our community. So I don't know if Ellen wants to add on to that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, Rosie. I think there is a lot of additional complexity, both, you know, legal and structural, financial that comes in with including childcare. I will note that some funders, many funders now are providing, you know, additional scoring in a competitive funding round for housing funding for including childcare. So I think it is seen as a priority across the state and does give a project some advantage when competing for housing funds.
Great, thank you both. I think Melissa Nyberg has her hand up.
I do, thank you. Rosie, you may have said this, I really apologize if I missed this. I have that there's going to be 56 units. Did you say the general structure of how many units are going to be studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, etc.? Did I miss that? I'm sorry if I did.
Oh yeah, in my word slurry, who knows what was in there. They're all going to be 1 bedroom units. And oh, one exciting feature I'll mention is that we're going to have air conditioning, which I'm really jazzed about and has been a really big struggle to pay for. But I just our feeling that, especially with seniors and the way that our summers are going, seems like they're just not the summers that I grew up with. That makes me sound very elderly myself, but I just don't remember it being this hot, but it's really getting hotter and hotter. So that's one thing. They're all going to be 1-bedrooms and they're going to have AC. So yay for that part.
That is exciting. Thank you, Rosie. Vaughn has his hand up.
Yeah, so I think if I have this, I was wondering about, is it going to be, are there goals for like all electric building for the Laurel Forest project, or mostly have it photovoltaic ready, or any kind of like composting, anything sustainable regenerative design type stuff included?
Yeah, for all the projects that receive funding through the Department of Commerce and have to meet this, what's it called? Evergreen Sustainable Design Standard, ESDS. And so there's like a point scoring system where to qualify, you have to score a certain number of points. So you can kind of choose how you meet that green standard, depending on your unique project. You're like, like this project, it just doesn't make sense to do solar panels because of like where we are and where the lighting, the shade or something, but you could then make up for it in other areas. I believe that we are going to be doing solar panels, or at least be solar panel ready, with the possibility of like, we could always add them in later. And I believe that we are going to be all electric building. And I know I'm sure, I see Sammy's here. She could probably speak to their change coming with all electric buildings. I'm not sure. We don't mean to throw you out there, Sammy. I just remember seeing a meeting about that.
Yep, in August.
Okay, yeah. So I don't know if our building was technically not under that because we were already under production, but we're going to be all electric.
And that's the same for the Barclay project and the Millworks project. Both are all electric, and will include solar panels and other sustainable features, whether that's, energy conserving appliances or enhanced envelope performance. But as Rosie said, there's the state standard, and then also just some of the design decisions that make sense both from a sustainability and an operational perspective. So it's definitely a high priority, I know, for both of our organizations.
Great, thanks. It looks like we have one more hand up, Rachel Monroe, and then I think after this question, we'll move on to our last panelist, and then open up the floor to general questions. So Rachel, your question?
Yeah, this is actually Pam Kahn. I'm on Rachel's phone with Rachel, but I was wondering, I thought we were talking about units for 55 and older, and then 1-bedroom. So is the childcare for the people that reside in this building, or is the childcare just a separate operating feature?
Great question. It is a separate operating, totally separate section. So we're hoping to have some cool programming that happens, but the childcare will be open to the public, and I hope to OC employees in particular, because I know that staff at nonprofits also need affordable childcare. So that's the plan, is that we just be open to anyone.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Amazing, thank you, Rosie. I am to introduce our last panelist. We are fortunate today to be joined by Emily O'Connor, the Executive Director at Lydia Place. Lydia Place is working on a variety of housing projects and just recently completed construction on Hart House, a mixed-use development with 11 units of permanent supportive housing apartments designed for mothers with children experiencing homelessness. We're excited to hear Emily speaking to her experience developing affordable housing, and learn more about that project and hopefully a few others. So Emily, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, everybody. I'm going to probably make you nauseous here with the, maybe I should blur my background. I just hit a patch of not great service. And so shout at me if you can't actually hear what I'm saying, and I'll turn my video off, which might help. Rosie, I was feeling so good when you started talking, because I too am showing up not super prepared today. When Terry asked me to do this, I said, I'm not a housing developer. I don't have any expertise to share in this. And also I'm off on that day. So I feel bad about it all over again.
Emily, you probably do want to not share your video because you are getting garbled.
One little funny story. Let's see if that's better.
All right, we didn't hear anything, but we see that your video is now off, but you're also—
Am I still a robot, Samia?
I think you're back. So let's try it. Give it one more try. Just make sure to unmute yourself. Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Okay, this might be a little challenging, so maybe we should move on and see if you come out of this patch, Emily, maybe you can join us again.
We can leave the floor open, Emily. And if you join later, we'll definitely yield that time for your presentation. But yeah, coming in garbled for me as well. Okay, so I think we can use this time to open up the floor for questions to our panelists about their experience developing affordable housing. Any questions that folks may have about affordable housing development in general, please feel free to raise your hand and ask any questions that may strike you.
I'll just add, maybe as people are thinking that, obviously this meeting is about homelessness and housing issues and for folks across the whole county. And so my work is with the city of Bellingham specifically, and the county does have more resources now than they used to when it comes to facilitating affordable housing. And we do, the public funders do try to work together really, really closely. The county, the city, the state, the Housing Finance Commission that was mentioned. And something that the city and county have tried to collaborate more on in recent years is having sort of an open application that allows folks to just put an idea forward about new housing development without having to know a lot of information yet. And that can come from the city of Ferndale or from a nonprofit or from from other sources, just to help get it on folks' radar that there's this need articulated, or there's this desire to do this thing for this population, and start to get those ideas circulating within the community, so we can try to support each other. And Ellen mentioned the competitiveness of these funds, and I think Rosie did too. We want to try to work together and not force agencies within our small county to compete against each other. And so there's a lot of effort to try to align the timing of these projects so that we can help them be successful no matter what, and help bring a little bit more certainty, because there's nothing that's more frustrating to affordable housing folks than, putting a ton of time in and expecting to be able to move forward on something, but then not getting funded and then having to delay for a year or maybe 2 years. And sometimes those kind of uncertainties can really just ruin a project and make it unsuccessful. So we try to work together and do that. And if folks have curiosities, I'll dig up the link at least to the city's website that sort of will give you information about what those types of applications, simple applications, to just kind of put forward the intent to do that.
Thank you, Samia. It looks like we have a question from Vaughn.
Okay, so I have two pictures in my head, and sometimes I'm a messy thinker, so please be patient with me. One picture has to do with emergency shelter. The other picture has to do with the possibility of like a limited equity cooperative coming together and trying to do affordable housing. And so I'm looking for are these pictures in my head like a heck no or a heck yes, or it depends, Vaughn, and you're on the right track, or you're not on the right track kind of thing. So the first one is like, if there's a group of people and they're interested in some sort of land trust, and maybe they are taking classes from the Foundation for Intentional Community. So they know that they want to join together and they want to create a limited equity cooperative. And they'd like to be able to be eligible for some of those tax credits and assistance. And I was like looking at the Department of Commerce, Finance Commission, all these things. There's like a program called the Teacher Next Door program, and it also reaches out to paraeducators and non-instructional staff. So I was thinking, like, what if there's a group of people who's all in the school district and they need affordable housing, and they decide to come together to do a limited equity cooperative? Can they be eligible for all of those tax credits and doing affordable housing development projects? Should I go into the second one, or or just pause?
I'm not, Ellen might be able to better explain, but I think with the tax credits, they're exclusively for rentals. They're not for home ownership opportunities. That it's for, like, you have to commit to 50 years of affordability for your rental apartment. So that's just the one I know. I'm not positive about all the other funding sources, but I know that a lot of what Ellen and I talked about were potentially exclusive to rentals. Ellen, feel free to not let me speak for you.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I do think there are resources at the state level for home ownership and other types of affordable housing. But Rosie's right, the tax credit program is specifically designed for rental housing. But there are other state or local funding sources that are targeted for different types of affordable housing. And Samia might have better thoughts on that too.
Yeah, homeownership and cooperatives, it's getting into more complex territory, not tax credit world, but there is a lot going on at the state level to look at broadening homeownership initiatives. There's a report out in August, I think, to the governor and the legislature by a state work group called the Homeownership Disparities Work Group, and part of that is have to do with supporting ownership cooperatives in the state. And then of course, Colson Community Land Trust has also done some work on this. So I'd encourage you to talk with them, but different funding sources.
I have talked a little bit with Colson Community Land Trust, or at least someone on their board. So I'm just casting seeds, like searching. May I continue to the next picture in my head?
Of course.
Okay, so the next picture, emergency weather type stuff. So I'm trying to think of combining different, all these different needs and different solutions. So in Seattle, there's something called the Block Project. I don't know how active they are right now, but the Block Project figured out how to build a living building, which is like 100%, it's like net positive energy, net positive water, and it's a tiny little thing that they put in the backyard of somebody else's house. So I was thinking, like, during emergency weather, whether winter or summer, and say someone, they have enough land and they want to help out with the homelessness issue, but they don't want to become a landlord, and they want to make sure there's lots of, they want to be safe and they want to make sure there's a vetting process before they help anybody out. So the picture I have in my head is that a homeowner says, I have all these property taxes and I don't want to be a landlord but I do want to help out. Can someone I'm sorry, I work with children in their background. I don't know how much you can hear the screaming in the back, but can there be a way that there's emergency sheltering structures? They say, okay, I volunteered to open up my backyard or my front yard, and we put a couple of emergency shelters, huts or something like that in the front yard or the backyard. And I would like somebody else to worry about the maintenance of it. I would like someone else to take care of the case management for it. But or can someone do that as a neighborhood or as a block and be like, as a block, we're going to agree that for 3 months per house on this block that we're going to help out one another, helping out other neighbors who are experiencing the homelessness quicksand. And then, they have backup from a different agency who's handling all the case management, and then a different agency who's also doing the, I guess, the maintenance aspect of it. Am I making sense? I'm not sure I am.
Rosie or Ellen, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, it sounds really cool. It's kind of outside of my expertise. And I mean, I will say also my expertise is I've come from working apartment rentals and now working in development for the last 4 months. So it's kind of a limited expertise, to be honest. I just not sure how that would work within our current pipeline. We're building a pipeline of mostly focused on rentals. And so that's kind of, outside of what we've been doing, but that sounds like a really cool idea. I just Googled the block project, by the way.
And one more thing to add about emergency weather events. I know that I did Washington Conservation Corps once upon a time, and I know that they helped out some with the floods in November, and there's also AmeriCorps NCCC. And City of Bellingham, I think they still have 2 Washington Conservation Corps crews. So I was wondering about, could there be we have those Conservation Corps crews, could we have a specific emergency weather event Bellingham crew or Whatcom County crew or both, where there's more AmeriCorps awards now that are smaller contracts? You don't have to do the 10-month thing. You can do the 300 to 450 hour thing and clock in your hours, and maybe you don't get a stipend, but at least you get that educational award at the end. And so could there be, and I've talked about this some with other people too, so it's not only my idea at this point when I'm saying this. So could it be that there's AmeriCorps, we get AmeriCorps people, or people signed up for this AmeriCorps emergency crew, emergency event crew, and we ask Human Services Department from Western, we ask all the environmental majors and everyone at the university and at the community college and at the technical college, and we get like this a wide variety of people with different skill sets, but they come with skill sets, with like, they already have their first aid stuff and they already have some background in social work, and they risk mitigation and all that kind of thing. And so could the city have these crews of 5 to 10 people to start? And then they also, and that way they still have something, they sign up for however long that they can, and then at the end of their contract, they still get some sort of educational award. And that way, I mean, our volunteers, there's been a shortage of volunteers. It's an
Vaughn,
on.
Vaughn, I'm so sorry. We are, Emily's back and is available to give her presentation, but I do want to answer your question. Are you able to, can anyone speak to Vaughn's question before we move on to Emily?
Yeah, that was basically the end of it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Vaughn. Sorry to pivot, but we do have Emily back, so I'm going to yield the floor to her to speak to her experience developing affordable housing. And then we can open up the floor for more questions. Thanks for your patience, folks. Appreciate it.
Hi, everybody. Nice of you to let me back in. Sorry about that. Back in town now. So as Katie mentioned, Lydia Place, we just opened Heart House, and Heart House was about a 6 or 8 year project that involved quite a few moving parts, and is both permanent supportive housing for families with children and on the ground floor childcare, which is going to be operated by the Y. And we're really excited to see that blended model of support for families. Lydia Place has, in addition to the housing programs, we also have parenting support and clinical behavioral health, mental health program. And so we're really excited to be able to blend all of those components together in this particular project. It's little. We built it on one of the properties that, as an organization, we've owned for over 30 years. It is on Gladstone Street in town near Civic Field. And really our hope was just to maximize the effectiveness of that piece of property for community benefit, because that's our jobs as nonprofits. The project, of course, ended up being significantly more expensive and more time consuming than we thought. We broke ground shortly after the pandemic began. And so we saw the cost of construction increase really significantly over the past year and a half, which had a large impact on the budget. It's a project that would not have been possible without the support of the city housing levy or the state housing trust fund. And there was also it was more financially viable because of the child care center. So I heard that question earlier. That was a good way to be able to attract additional funders into the project and kind of bring the whole thing together. Lots of local private foundations and individuals, really just piecemeal bits of support after those large foundational pieces from the city of Bellingham and the State Housing Trust Fund. The property itself, because it's permanent supportive housing, will have some subsidized units that are subsidized with Section 8 vouchers, and others that are a little bit more flexible. But we're excited to add that little piece of housing into the mix here in Bellingham. And the residents will have access to, children of the residents will have priority access to the on-site childcare, but then it will be opened up to the community as well. And we really love the idea of having a spot that can build community, where it's not just a single sort of isolated population, but the addition of the child care center really allows us to integrate more community into that residential spot. So that's pretty exciting for us as well. Rosie, I was going to caution you, Heart House was a placeholder name for us was 6 years ago, and we were like, oh, we can't, like, what do we name this thing? And we just sort of stuck Heart House on it as a placeholder. And as sometimes happens, they stick. So careful with your placeholder names. Sometimes that just ends up being the name. We've learned a lot along the way. We're, as I tried to say earlier, we're not a housing developer. We're service providers, but we're trying to see what are the ways that we can grow and contribute additionally to the needs of the community. this felt like something we could do. Building it is one set of challenges, and then of course finding operational funding, and then addressing all of those suite of needs, from the needs of the residents themselves to property management and owning a piece of property, and the asset management component too. So it's a big, even though it's a small program in terms of number of units, it's 11 1 and 2 bedroom units. It's a big lift for a little nonprofit to do. And so we're been really grateful for all of the support and lent expertise in the community, from design through development and into operations. Anyway, I could send you lots of pretty pictures. It's very exciting to see the project come together, really exciting to have it open. Of course, we need many, many more of them, but we're really excited to see that integration of services on a single site, and looking forward to continuing to hear all of these creative ideas about how we can figure out how to do better for neighbors and families here in the community.
Thank you so much, Emily. We have a question in the chat I'm hoping you can speak to from Rana Keith, asking if you can explain the difference between subsidized housing and affordable housing.
Well, I guess it just depends on the circumstance. So we can subsidize housing to be affordable for someone, or we can build housing that is affordable for who is the question, right? And so really looking at what is the housing, what income category are we trying to build housing for, and defining what that affordability should be. So our units at Lydia Place, this project, they will, are they all 30% and below? There might be a couple that can go up to 50% AMI and below. Sammy might be able to correct me in that, but they're really low income, and that's really our target, particularly with families with children. So many of them have no income at all, and so those income limitations are not hard for us to meet. And all of the units will need to be subsidized at some level, and the tenants would pay up to 30% of their income if they had any income to contribute.
I was just going to tag on to that, Emily. The way that I've always tried to keep those, because those terms do get thrown around a lot and it's confusing, is like affordable housing is below the market. So it's lower than what you could get if you just went on Craigslist or that kind of thing. Whereas subsidized is tied to the family's income. So if the family's income goes down, the amount they pay in rent goes down. If their income goes up, the amount they pay in rent goes up. So those are just kind of how I've tried to keep those two terms separated in my brain.
That's great. Thanks.
I have another question I'm hoping you can speak to, Emily. Do you mind sharing kind of with this group kind of the difference between permanent supportive housing versus just kind of the affordable housing that Rosie and Ellen had talked about in the Laurel Forest project and the Barclay project?
Yeah, I mean, for us, these units they come with a whole suite of services, and participation in case management is required while they are there. So this isn't it's not low income housing that we're just sort of contributing into the fold of affordable or low income housing. These are units that come paired with, it's the housing and the support. And so they aren't time limited. Families can stay there as long as they need that support. But it's very intensive suite of services that are available and very expensive to operate. And so we want families, these are also, by the way, very small. They're beautiful units, but they're very small units. So as children grow, families might want some more space or to be in other places. Families are constantly changing and shifting their needs. And so what we love to see is folks be able to move on into other scenarios that allow them different types of choices, and we love it when they just don't need us anymore. I'm like, you don't need our support anymore. Case management, parenting. Sometimes the housing components will end, but they'll carry on, say, in the with their clinician in therapy, or they'll carry on in the parenting program. And so permanent supportive housing for us just means it comes with that whole suite of intensive services as options for folks. And that means that those resources are really precious in our community and should be targeted to families with children who have the most sort of complex and robust needs that might really need that extra level of support that can come in that environment. So this is a building, for example, that has, really has security and security cameras and monitoring. And so those types of things where we're trying to build in extra buffers and boundaries to help families kind of be able to stabilize and figure out what it is that they want for their next kind of chapter of childhood, et cetera. So that's what that means for us, is that permanent supportive housing comes with not just housing support, but it comes with parenting options and mental and behavioral health support as well, and connections to any other services that folks might need in the community.
Thanks so much. That's so helpful and informative. Vaughn and Doug, I see both of your hands up. I'm going to request that we put a pause on this conversation for now. We have about 10 minutes left in the agenda, and we need to get through our agency updates. So we'll be super brief, go through those, and then hold space at the end to kind of revisit all of the general questions around affordable housing, and also open up the agenda to receive public comment for items that aren't on the agenda today. So thank you for your patience. Right now, we're going to shift to city updates, and I'm going to kick it over to Samya, who will be providing updates for the city of Bellingham.
Thanks, Katie. I'll be super quick here. A couple links I want to share in the chat, and I'll just give you some context about them. The first is a link to a meeting with City Council where we talked about serving families experiencing houselessness or homelessness that some of you might be interested in. And I put that link there. You can look at that. The presentation broadly covered our strategy for supporting agencies that work with families with children. And we did hear from some of those agencies as well. The next update is just to let you know that there's a hearing examiner, a land use hearing coming up on June 8th at 6 p.m. For the Lighthouse Missions project that they're doing in Old Town. If you're interested in attending that or getting more information about what's going on there, you can look at that second link that I've provided. This next update doesn't have a link, but just wanted to let folks know that the Downtown Ambassador Program is being implemented and is in effect downtown. They're coordinating closely with our behavioral health providers, the HOT team and others. And I think Katie probably knows a lot more about this than I do. So if you have questions about that, please bring those up. And then lastly, the city is in the midst of updating our 5-year consolidated plan. That's a requirement of the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. It really guides everything that we can invest in related to housing and services. So it's an important planning process for us. The new 5-year plan will be implemented starting in July of next year. And so there's a lot going on to prepare for that, including a couple of surveys that we will be putting out there. The first one I just put into the chat. The first one is really about fair housing issues and fair housing as defined by the federal government. So that is related to folks' protected classes and any discrimination based on someone's status, their sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, that kind of thing. So we're really trying to get a feel for folks who have experienced discrimination in this community. So feel free to fill that out yourselves or pass it on to folks that you work with. We will be doing various focus groups throughout the coming months with different specific populations, and another survey that's a little bit more broad coming up in the fall. So I'll stop there to leave more time.
Thanks so much, Samia. Appreciate those updates. For the Whatcom County updates and the Whatcom Homeless Service Center updates, both of those staff members are absent and provided me some updates to share. So I'll be super brief in providing those updates so we can hold space at the end of this meeting for more discussion around the affordable housing topic and as well as general public comments. So I'll start with the county updates. The updates provided to me first is the RFP for both an interim emergency severe weather shelter and an access ID program are going to be released this summer with contracts expected to begin in January. County will be sure to keep this body updated as those are released. And if there are any questions on those, please feel free to reach out and I can forward whatever queries there are on to Ann Beckett County. County also wanted me to share that there's an open invitation to attend the County Council's Committee of the Whole meeting on Tuesday, June 7th for a 15 to 20 minute presentation from the health department. And this presentation is going to be focusing on the county's housing system and programs. The meeting time is still to be determined, but it's probably going to be aiming for around 3 or 3:30. So if there's any interest there, please feel free to reach out and I can forward questions on to Whatcom County Health Department and they can forward more information your way. The last update from county is that the point in time count report is currently being drafted and it is expected to be published in June. So look out for that. Moving on to the Whatcom Homeless Service Center updates. Terry left me some updates to share. I know that we have homeless service center staff here, so I think I'll read the updates and if folks have any questions, I can direct them to OC staff if that works. Whatcom Homeless Service Center continues to partner with Peace Health, Unity Care Northwest, and the county to plan for the Way Station project. So that is ongoing with more updates expected soon. There's some staffing updates at the Homeless Service Center. One staffing update, the HOT team is fully staffed now. So that's exciting going into the summer season. The OC also recently completed interviews for a landlord liaison position and a family shelter specialist, and will be recruiting for a housing navigator or formerly a house lab case manager in July. So be on the lookout for that posting. And yes, those are all the updates I have for the Whatcom Homeless Service Center. So if folks have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And since those are all the updates for the city, the county, and the Whatcom Homeless Service Center, we can open the floor back up to just questions about the affordable housing panel or any questions folks may have about any of the agency updates that were provided or any opportunity for public comment on items that weren't included on the agenda today, but items that folks would like to discuss. So with that, I will, it looks like Marcus D. Stidham has his hand up. So Marcus, please feel free to ask your question.
Great, thank you. I'm actually, it's a little bit of a response and perhaps a little bit of a remark also on the subject of emergency sheltering. Thank you, Vaughn, for bringing that up. And this is in rather response to Vaughn Ochoa's questions about it. Not a lot of people do have experience with that type of work. It's true. It has to do with mutual aid, which is something that we need to empower in our communities. It's something that during the negotiations at Camp 210 with the mayor and the city planners there, we were trying to negotiate, trying to lower the barriers that keep citizens from helping. Because the requirements that are there, of course, are that they need an entity to be indemnifiable, to sign on the dotted line, to take those risks. Nonetheless, we still can move a lot forward as a community. And I just want to say that, yes, that we did have an existing similar program of small, starting in March of 2020. I was contacted when I was with Homes Now. I was contacted by somebody who was asking, it was a medical professional, asking if they could host somebody in their backyard with some tents and get a temporary kitchen set up and try and give them facilities and everything else for medically fragile homeless folks to come in and take shelter and try and stay isolated in this person's backyard. It worked brilliantly. It went through October of 2021. I did speak to different civic officials about the efficacy of such a great program if we could just lower the barriers that keep citizens from helping, and it kind of seemed to have fallen on deaf ears. What I think is really missing is civic will here, guys. We need to encourage our civic leaders to lower the barriers that keep citizens from helping, to keep a neighborhood group from hosting 6 tiny homes in a corner of a park in their neighborhood or whatever. If that's their choice that they would like to do that, we should encourage that, promote the general welfare, not resist. And so we've seen those barriers actually increase over the last few years, and I just want to make sure we speak to that and we see that clearly together. And I see Rana is also asking for churches to step up. All of these, it's a community answer. Yes, it's the government's responsibility. So, but it is, we can do that. SOS, Serenity Outreach Services, stands ready to partner with city and county officials to host an emergency triage, trauma-informed care center with separation, safe for any type of emergencies, using emergency dollars available. We're in a declared state of emergency since 2017. Let's not forget that. We can take emergency action. So again, it's about civic will. If we encourage our leaders just to move, we can move it. But we have to see the problem. I mean, families, when I see families in the street, honestly, my heart really goes out, because I do service in the street. So it's like, I get it. And I'm so happy to see families with children being prioritized. I really am. But we can't keep leaving the same people out every time. And so we need to dip lower for them. We need to bring them up. And we need to encourage our governments to work with us to do that. I think that is the answer. We need land and we need civic will. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments, Marcus. We're at time, but I want to hold some space for any more brief comments that folks may have. Are there any additional brief comments or questions that folks may have? Vaughn, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I had a question about for Emily, Lydia Place. I was wondering how, I'm sorry if I missed it, how folks who are undocumented, how approaching their situation, how does Lydia Place approach their situation?
Hi, that is a great question, and sort of depends on what program opening there is and what the housing requirements are for each of those, or the documentation requirements for each of those. And I'll be honest, I'm not the best person to answer on those details. And I don't know if there's still a couple of Lydia Place housing crew on here, or somebody else who can probably give you a better answer than I can.
I'm happy to answer to the best of my ability for that. So in short, it depends, like Emily said, on what is required for the program. Most of the programs and the housing options available through Lydia Place do not require any sort of documentation of citizenship, but there is definitely some apprehension around receiving housing that is connected to some sort of government funded subsidy. So I think that there's delicate conversations we try to have with families about what that might mean for future pursuit of citizenship and kind of how that could impact them and encourage them to get connected and help them get connected to legal representation to really talk through their options, because that is not our area of expertise, but we do know that that certainly is a concern. But it is not for many families and for majority of the program spot is not a requirement. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you, Emily. We're a little over time. Rana, I really want to get to your question. I'm hoping you can be, I'm hoping to give you the floor to answer it. I'm hoping that we can be brief because we are at time, but please feel free to take the floor and ask your question.
First, I'm so sorry. I'm new to this type of way of speaking to people. I'm used to in person. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that is working on this. And I just want to say one thing. Anybody working with families that are living in RVs or cars, and how much of our population in Whatcom currently is that part of the whole? Do we know those numbers yet? Did I talk or not?
You did. Is there anyone on this call who has that information available?
Specifically, the number that are in cars, was that the question?
Yes, the pit count that was done was vehicle residency included in this count, and who obtained this count? Was it the entire community?
I don't think we have an accurate number of that, but we do try and, I wish we did. We don't. Okay. We do have numbers that get updated monthly, and I don't have those at my fingertips, but those are, the service center tracks the number of families. I think the last number of total families that I heard, which I think has gone down a little bit from that report, but it was like 130 at the time.
Right.
Those are, that is not, it's not a specific answer to your question though about how many are in cars, though sometimes they do know at least of that number of folks who end up in the service center at the Opportunity Council and on that waiting list. We have some additional information about that, but we have.
And that is submitted to the HUD Urban Monthly for yearly for funds.
So Rana, I put a little bit more information about the point in time count report in the chat. So feel free to visit the Whatcom County website, and it goes a little bit more into detail about what the report covers and what it's a snapshot of, as well as what agencies in the community administer the report. I think I mentioned this during the updates, but the link is to the 2021 report. The 2022 report is in the process of being updated, and I think we expect the new report to be published in June. So folks, we're also over time. So unfortunately, I have to say that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, in particular our panel, Rosie, Ellen, and Emily. Thank you so much. We really enjoyed hearing from you and learning a little bit more about your experience developing affordable housing. It was great to see and hear all of you members of the public as well. I want to note a quick reminder that our next meeting is going to be held in August, and I believe the topic will be focusing on veteran homelessness. So be sure to tune in then. Feel free to reach out if there's any questions that folks have that arise during this meeting. But more than anything, thank you for joining us all, and have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.